What's up, everyone? I'm here with Cheryl and Mike of Mike's Exotics.
How's it going, guys?
Thank you guys both for doing this. So, when did you guys get in the hobby?
Oh, you want to go first?
All right, I'll scoot over a little bit here. We're gonna kind of split it up a little bit because Cheryl's the blue tongue queen here, and then I do some of the other stuff here. But yeah, I started in about. I started keeping reptiles since I was a little kid, but I don't really count that as like professional, career or anything. But 2008, 2007, 2008, somewhere around then is when I started actually like buying like ball pythons and boas and things like that, and kind of got into it then. And then Cheryl.
Oh, me. I don't
Your turn.
It's funny. I actually started breeding birds first before reptiles. I used to want reptiles, always had interest in them, but everyone I knew was absolutely terrified of them. My brother actually snuck home a couple reptiles when I was little. My first reptile was a red-eared slider from Chinatown. So, yeah, I didn't take the best care of him because it was pre, my internet usage time, and I didn't really know anything about the care. And I actually had him for about 10, 15 years before I rehomed him, thank God. So he did really well. And then as far as skinks go, I can't remember. I got my first one in 2013 or 2014. I don't really remember exactly when. Named her Jabba. I was really hoping she was going to be a male, but it ended up being a female because I really just wanted a pet and just named it after Jabba. And she was kind of what got me started. And then I got a couple other ones. I got Nugget from James Wilson, and then another one from Andrew Secchi. And I have all three of those still, all three girls. And I kind of just expanded after that.
Now, do you only have northerns, or what other types do you have there?
I have Easterns as well. I used to have the New South Wales type. Now I just have a few of the Victorians that TC Houston brought in. Well, one was a holdback from the pair I got from him. I ended up selling the others off, which I deeply regret, but it's okay.
I think the green Victorians are probably my favorite, just the unique look, and I don't know, just green always stands out to me on some species.
Yeah, they're awesome. I'm lucky the one I held back to is bright green. Both the parents are green. The male is more green than the female. The offspring I've seen that's sold, it's kind of been hit or miss. Some look more like kind of like what we would call the New South Wales type, more kind of black and, gray, whitish. And then some did have that black green, or not that green to them.
So it might just be something that needs a little more time working and refining.
I think it's just natural variation.
Oh.
Yeah. I honestly don't know, but that's would be my assumption.
Well, and with blue tongues, the litters, you can get literally a little bit of everything, so it definitely makes it harder.
Yeah, I actually there's one pairing I did. So the orange one you got from me years ago, I know it came from one of James Fenn's females, and I think the male as well. And I don't know if it was the same female that produced the baby you got. Most of the babies from that litter that I produced this past season were kind of like, more classic type brown, just generic wild type. And then I had two really weird ones. I had one just bright orange, like the one you have with zero black. And then another one that kind of looked more hypo. It had like a red back to it. And I ended up holding both of those back. And I was actually wondering, I was like, man, I got to ask him if he remembers who the mom was, because I am curious if it's the same.
So I actually believe it was like Tiffy and Popeye.
It was not the same ones then. Huh. You think so?
I'm pulling it up right now because I got it written down in my spreadsheet. Yeah, Tiffy and Popeye. Tiffy produced by Cheryl from a Fen male to a Psych female from James Wilson.
So I wonder if that was actually that might actually be the grandmother to yours then. I gotta look back. Honestly, I lost most of my records between moving stuff.
Well, and I mean, either way, those are two great ones that you definitely held back. Like, I'm biased, obviously, but I really like the no black,
Yeah, I've got some interesting ones that from the kind of like the more pink line I'm working on, and then some of them have kind of more of like a more caramelly, look to them, because obviously there's so much variation. I am trying to strive for more pink animals, but then of course some are going to be more tan colored. And there's one that reminds me so much of like the Hypo Easterns. Just the color, absolutely zero black, and how the bandings are.
Yeah. Well, and those are beautiful. Like, eventually I'll get some of those too, but I got to get more room. Even after moving here recently, it filled up fast.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, luckily we do have a lot of space, more or less, but I also do not want to get to the size that I once had, because I'm going to be honest, it was too much. I mean, when during breeding season, I mean, you'll spend 10 hours, 12 hours a day easy pairing.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then as far as the rate, as far as who actually produces, it just tends to drop over time. That's how many you have.
Well, and at a certain point too, you need to start adding people then if you got that many animals plus babies on top of it.
Yeah, and I never want to get to that point.
Yeah, I'd rather
don't.
stay.
No, never. No employees. Nope. Don't. I'm gonna be honest. I can't trust anyone with my animals. I mean, like, if they screw up, it's not only their fault, but it is also my fault for not, being there on top of it. And
yeah, like I enjoy it being a full-time job, but I don't want it to be a full-time job and then also have to manage employees on top of that. I mean, at that point, it's like, you know what? I just want to get by with what we have, breed what we can, make enough to have a comfortable life here, doing what we love, and not necessarily become millionaires off of this. I don't know if that's even possible these days, but
Yeah.
Well, and it's hard because you really have to find that right person, especially you guys do a lot of shows. If they're going to hang back and watch the collection, not to put a price on animals, but I'm sure it adds up, everything you guys got there, and you don't want that to run away, by trusting not the best workers.
Nope. And I mean, I have a lot of animals that you cannot neglect for a day. So it is, I mean, it's tough for me to travel to. And luckily I do have a couple of friends that, when we very rarely can leave, they'll come in and check up on stuff and take care of things. But it's still very stressful being away. Oh, yeah. Especially for me.
Yeah, and we try and get as much stuff as possible kind of like situated for the 3 or 4 days or whatever we're going to be gone, and then just the very bare minimum, like some of the livestock and things outside, obviously they need daily care, so we have friends come over and check on that. But for the most part, that's the good thing about reptiles too, is that most of them they can get away with a few days if you set them up ahead of time, where like obviously like chickens and goats and all that stuff, they just need to be tended to.
And I've got baby chicks constantly because I'm crazy. So
you're a masochist.
Yeah.
And now, are all the baby chicks planned, or?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm hatching out more or less the breeds that I kind of want to. Like right now, I'm hatching out Silkies and Showgirls. Then I have the white-faced black Spanish, which I started hatching out. And then I just hatch out geese right now. During the summer, I hatch out a lot more of just about everything. And right now, I'm waiting on the emus to start laying. Like there was one weekend we left, and we came home to like baby emus in the incubator, quail, ducks, chicks, geese. It was chaotic.
Did the emu end up making it?
We did lose one. It hatched out with like its yolk sac like still exposed, and it was, I don't know what caused it. I tried asking other people, they had no idea. They just said it's just like one of those things that occasionally happens. So unfortunately that one did pass. But we have 2 now that are about full grown. They grow crazy fast. And I don't know, how old are they now? When did they hatch out? April?
Oh man, yeah, I have to look back at the Facebook pictures.
But they'll fit in the palm of your hand in April, and now they are about like 5.5 feet tall.
I was gonna say, they're like probably 60, 70 pounds now.
Yeah.
Wow, that is crazy fast.
Mm-hmm.
So another year then, would those be mature enough to breed, or do emus take a couple years?
From what I've heard is like 18 months. Mine didn't start breeding until about 3 years old, but I also moved in that process, and sometimes moving can actually upset them that they won't breed. So last year was the first time that they actually bred and laid eggs, and now I'm waiting for more this year.
So, what are your steps on cooling and warming up the blue tongues?
So I mean, I obviously, like, I'll feed them as much as I can to fatten them up after the breeding season, and then I'll wait a few weeks between my last feed with them and then shutting them down. Um, Honestly, the temperatures downstairs are usually start off pretty warm during the time I do shut them down, which is usually late October, early November. So I just turn off the heat completely. And then it cools down during December. January and February are honestly the coolest months here. But now in the last few years, I've been starting to warm them up in January. Last year, it wasn't even intentional. We had a huge warm front that was like 60, 70 degrees. Heat was completely off, but it warmed up so much downstairs that everyone was running around. Like, people were scratching at the front of their cages and stuff. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to turn the heat back on. I'm going to start pairing them. Within one day, I think I got like, I want to say it was like 14, 15 locks.
Have you ever tried to continue it even though they're up, or once they're up at that point, you pretty much just say, well, might as well turn the heat on?
Yeah, I turn the heat on and I just go with it then, and I breed for the next month. Yeah.
Because this year I wanted to go 2 weeks later because I got another shoulder surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And so I more or less put the AC on in the room to get it cooler to
Wow.
like 66.
How warm is it in your house? Wow.
Well, some of it, so I had the bugs that put off a lot of heat on one side of the room, and I had 2 racks of holdbacks that were still having heat. But yeah, the bugs in general, I got 16 colonies, so that, 8 heat mats puts off a bit. They're 4 foot by 2 foot seed mats.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm fighting myself in a way on one side and trying to cool on the other. Like, I wrap a big tarp around the bugs to keep their heat in to cool the other side. It works, but it's not a perfect science, definitely.
Yeah, and we struggle with heat right now. I mean, it's cold outside.
Yeah, I gotta go chop some wood after the podcast.
Oh, save so much money. You have no idea. I don't need an $800 electric bill this month.
Well, and that is a bit of work, but yeah, you could definitely save a lot of money with because I'm guessing like a wood burning stove or.
So, it's really weird what they did. We have a fireplace, and for some reason, the previous owners stuck a wood burning stove in the fireplace.
Yeah, they had like a retrofit wood stove into the fireplace, and I mean, it works fine. It would have worked better if it was outside the fireplace and more in the room, but still helps.
Yeah.
Every little bit we can save a little bit here. So
and we want to clear a bit of the woods anyways for a little bit more pasture, and we've got so many like dead and dying trees, so essentially all those are coming down.
It's a win-win situation. We need to cut down the deadfall and all that, and then we also save a little bit on our heating bill. So.
Well, and getting rid of all that dead stuff, not that Missouri gets that many wildfires, just you never know.
Yeah.
A lot safer, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they do a lot out here. They do a lot of controlled burns. Like, everywhere you'll see it. So I'm not surprised they don't really get that many fires.
Let's see. How do you determine your pairings?
So, I mean, there's certain ones that I do have plans for as far as a certain direction I want to go into, as far as coloration, patterns. More of the classic ones, I just kind of try to find, like, some I'll actually do put multiple males on the female as a backup male. But I do try to choose similar looking males for the females.
Now, say you got the white male that you want to put to your white female and she's not going. What do you do next? Do you have a backup white for each pairing, or like set backup males, or you kind of wing it?
Some I do not have backups for, and like there are specific pairings. They are a few of them that I'm like, well, it has to be this male, and I'm gonna just take the risk. it's either she's going to produce a viable litter or she's not. So I kind of just, roll the die on that. So that lighter female that I paired, what was it, yesterday? She was actually an Andrewsecki female, and she's about close to 20 years old, or if not over 20 years old. And I haven't got a litter out of her in a few years. And I just got this new white male from a friend. And I was like, I'm just going to try and just do that pairing. And just hope for the best with that guy. I have tried putting other lighter colored males on her, and I still have got nothing the past few years. I don't have a male for everything. Like, there are some unique males that I really don't essentially have doubles for or similar for.
Yeah, some are a lot harder. Like, I'm sure you got one, a backup orange, but you might have that insanely solid orange, no black, with nice unique pattern, or whatever that you want to try. I hear you.
Yeah.
So some breeders will talk like a certain gene will like enhance their pairings. Like on the episode I had with Dave, he talked about how Turner White he wants to put in everything. Do you have one like that?
So I know he's been on the Turner White kick. So the Pink Project is something I did start with. Turner White was a big part of. That is probably the only one I did do the Turner White with. I do have one of the black and gray females from Ray. She produced maybe 4 years ago, only had 2 babies, and I haven't gotten anything out of her since. I mean, I've got a Turner White male from Ray. I haven't really bred him. The original Turner White Dave still has. But I do have the offspring of the Turner White female, which is actually that female from that pink line. Oh, they were back. We lost the camera. That was a big part, with the pink, red and white. And then the caramel reduced the black a lot on the sides.
So it's not necessarily a certain gene that you have to have in each project, though.
I mean, it's all polygenetic. It's not it's not black and white. It's not recessive codominant. I do this and it's gonna equal this. It's gonna vary so much, and you can encourage it to go in a certain direction that you'd like, but it's not gonna come out exactly how you want it every time. At least not for a while.
Yeah, and well, I know Manny has talked the hypocalico. He really likes to help. Kind of like how Enchi and ball pythons, it makes it stay brighter, but that could just be line breeding also, been refining projects for years that eventually they're going to stay brighter and more colorful longer.
Yeah, I don't really know much about the hypocalico thing, really much at all. I just know, if I'm wrong, please correct me because I could be wrong. The original male came from Diana Mason. And I don't know where she got that. And he was a really unique looking animal. And then she was sent that skink over to Europe. And that originated the hypocalico line out there, from what I've heard.
I've heard similar, yeah. She didn't have the best lineage on it. And because of how it was back then, she decided to part from it instead of dealing with it. And
it was pretty toxic back then.
Yeah.
Fortunately, yeah. It's changed a bit.
But so now that it has a name to it and it's okay. I mean, it was probably pure then, for all we know, realistically. Yep. I didn't see the original one. I'm guessing it looked pure, yeah.
I mean, yeah. I'll dig up a picture and send it to you. It was a really cool looking skink. Especially back then when, something like that unique was more of a bigger deal than now.
Well, and over the years, we've produced a lot more cool stuff, with especially, well, I don't know if there's more people breeding anymore, but a bit of new people preparing different things recently.
Yeah, over probably the last 5-6 years, there's been a lot more people breeding.
Well, I think, overall that's what we need. We need more people getting into it. Pet people, they're going to buy one where, someone that's going to breed, they might buy 20 or 30, and yeah, they'll produce some themselves, but they're going to get more people in. They're going to promote themselves in New York or wherever they live.
Yeah. Brian was a big part of, building up the skink community too. As far as, more people coming in, it rose the demand a lot. A lot more people got into them. But I also feel like there was an unrealistic expectation where it was like, well, they're easy, but they aren't ball pythons where you can just throw them in a bin and then get eggs and, babies just like that. Like, you have to be there to watch the pairings. And it could be hit and miss.
Yeah, and I watched a lot of people actually who did get into blue tongues kind of around that craze, and they kind of did think they would be as easy as ball pythons, and they failed. I mean, I was one of them. Even when I was at Outback, we had a little collection of northerns. It was only maybe 12 or 15 animals or something, and we got a few litters out of them, but we just didn't know what we were doing breeding them. So we got a couple litters, and most of them didn't really do a whole lot. And eventually I sold them to a friend who was in the blue tongues, and it worked out well because they started producing like crazy for him. But yeah, it was one of those things. It's just, you're always going to see a lot more pet customers, especially for something like that, where the breeding is way more involved than, just, again, a ball python or a corn snake or something.
Yeah. To me, blue tongues are really easy, even with as far as breeding them. But, my perspective is different than others. And also, I'm more obsessed, and I'll spend, hours a day staring at them and watching them.
Well, and that's kind of what you need, though, that, that passion, you're going to do all that extra research. You're going to spend that time, we'll call it staring at them, but you're learning the behavior as you do it. You're learning how they react to certain things, certain times of the year, and all that's going to benefit you down the road.
Mm-hmm. And I've found that, actually observing them and learning each individual skink's behavior will actually benefit you in the long run. As far as, when you pair them, it will dramatically decrease the chances of you dealing with traumatic injuries between them.
Yeah. Have you had any bad injuries?
I've never had limbs ripped off, never had tails ripped off, feet or anything like that. I've had close calls where, I'll notice the male having, very defensive behavior. You'll notice they'll turn their back, become very flat as far as a shield. And then they won't, when they want to breed, they'll usually gently grab the female and pull. But if you notice them going like that really quickly, that's a defensive thing. And if they grab their limb and they'll grab it and they'll flip as fast as they can, they could tear off the limb. So I've seen males that go in like that, and immediately I'll reach down and grab them. So I'll pay attention to how they are acting with each other. Even times you'll put males in, if they start freaking out and, pissing and pooing and trying to get out, it's remove them. Don't leave them in there. Females too, is I'll always check to see if they're receptive before I put them in, because of course the females will get defensive if they don't want a male pursuing them. You can do that easily by, you just scratch the base of their tail. And if they're receptive, you'll notice they'll start wagging and will actually raise their tail. You can also pinch their sides. So if they aren't receptive, a lot of time they'll tense up and you can't pinch the skin on their sides. If they are receptive, you can actually pinch it between your fingers like a male would do when they grab it. And you'll notice they'll sit still and they'll just start wagging their tail. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I'll start pairing that one.
And I think that right there will be, very helpful for new people. Now, have you tried pairing the ones that are not fully receptive, maybe just wag a little bit?
In the beginning, yeah. I really don't anymore. No, it's like, okay, she is clearly receptive. As far as just me touching her with my hand, I'm going to put a male in there. And I'm usually I'll watch males' behavior. I have some males that are more, aggressive than others that I'm like, okay, I have to sit there and be on top of them and watch them every second. There are certain males where, I don't ever advise anyone to ever do this because it is a risk, where I'll just throw them together and I can just walk away and not pay attention and just wait for them to do their thing. I will pair 4 or 5 animals at a time. and I'll just go by like their behavior as like, okay, well, I feel more comfortable with these, feel comfortable with these. And if there's one that's like, I'm not really too sure how this is going to go, like there is some defensiveness, yet some interest, I'm literally going to sit there on top of them and be ready to grab with a second if there's anything off.
One thing I just want to add that, anyone listening to this, that, you are well experienced, that maybe starting out, they should only start with one pair at a time.
Yes.
Just.
What? Oh, sorry. He's yelling at me. Yes, only do. Like, that's what I was saying, is like, I don't advise doing it. And especially like even the most experienced breeders do get comfortable with, okay, I'll do multiple pairings, and then you sit there and you get comfortable. And of course, when you're doing it for hours, you can get easily distracted, and then like something tragic can happen, like what seems like a blink of an eye. I might just be lucky, and maybe this will be my first year where something hopefully doesn't happen, but I've never. Yeah.
Well, I think it helps also that, you're checking the females beforehand. The male's behavior when they're ready. Some of these animals you've bred before, and, some males will act similar each year. So you know that, hey, this male is super easy, to the girls where, hey, this one's crazy. I should probably just do him and watch him,
Yeah, and I mean, their behavior can change from year to year too. So, and when you first start initially pairing, just pay attention. And once things like really start to go, I guess you can say, as far as like breeding goes, like in the beginning, it's usually can be a little bit more slower, but then once things start going, males will start grabbing immediately and start trying to lock pretty much immediately. Well, in the beginning, once you first warm them up, it can take like 10-20 minutes of them just kind of testing out and grabbing and then walking around.
Now, do you offer anything really special to like your pregnant females, whether supplements, diet?
No, I mean, I just give them generic diet. I do want to start trying to actually putting my gravid females outside during the warmer months. Unfortunately, around April here is when we start getting, warmer days. And I honestly really want to do that. I know he's building a bunch of Tegu closures out there anyway, so maybe we'll be able to do it this year, if not next year, and see how that goes. If that helps at all.
I don't think it would hurt. It's good sun for them. It's natural. Yeah. And sadly here, by the time mine are born, it's still too cold where it wouldn't really be worth it for me.
Yeah. I mean, here we obviously still really get cold days like right now, but I think January, February the worst, and then March it starts to warm up. April we start getting really nice days. May it'll get hot. June will get hot. We get like the extremes here. But I mean, there will be a point in time where a few weeks, a month, or whatever the females can go out there.
Yeah, like the end of March typically is like when it starts warming up. Like last year, I put my Tegus outside in the end of March. They did great, and Tegus and blue tongues, pretty similar temperatures as far as that sort of thing. But
can't Tegus handle it a little colder, or?
So, I mean, I'm sure they can, but the main thing is like in the wild, when it's getting cold like that, they're digging down deep under the ground, so they're not really experiencing the cold temperatures. Like when I brewmate mine, I put them down like they're about the same as the blue tongues right now, like in the high 50s area down in the basement. And I know a lot of people would breed them outside, but like in like Florida, obviously. So like it's going to get down in the 50s and maybe a little bit colder. But when that happens, they have the opportunity to dig really deeply, so they're not really experiencing those cold temperatures. So kind of yes and no. Like yes, they can survive in climates like that, but if they're actually exposed to like sub 40s, probably I'm sure they wouldn't make it. So.
Yeah, and once you get below the frost layer, it's a bit warmer down there for them.
Blue tongues are pretty hardy. I had I know this one person lost a blue tongue. They posted on, one of the groups, and they're like, well, it's going to get like 40 degrees or below freezing this week. And, it jammed itself through, I think, like the foundation of the house and disappeared. And they're like, well, should I just give up on it? And I was like, no, because I actually had a baby get out in fall. And during the winter, I mean, it got well below 0 degrees and we had like over a foot of snow. And I found it outside in spring basking.
It must have found somewhere at least somewhat warm.
I mean, obviously, if you throw them outside in the snow, they're going to survive. But like, I couldn't believe it. I thought I was crazy and hallucinating when I walked outside and saw it there. Which, thank God. I mean, it's fine. I still have it right now. It's a beautiful animal. It's a little miracle.
They're, resourceful animals, I guess. Wow.
Yeah.
Careful now, Missouri's going to ban them because they're invasive.
So you hear a lot of the time skinks are a numbers game. How can we raise the consistency rate in breeding them?
Oh, so I've gone from, like I said, first year with like 7 females, 100% went. And then I honestly don't really remember the years of like how many numbers each of the year, but I know like 3 years, I think I paired about I think 70 successful females were paired. I tried pairing between 75 and 80. So 70 were bred, and I probably only got like 20 something, maybe 30 actual litters of babies. Now, over 90% of my females will actually, cycle where either I'll get babies or slugs from them every year consistently. So clearly it was probably the males or when I paired or whatever. So now I'm just, I'm like last year I tried to use multiple males. Like there were pairings that I was like, well, I can't use another male because I can't guarantee, more guarantee what I'm expecting. And then the ones I do multiple males with, I try to use similar males. I bred 30 females last year, and I think 22 of them gave me actual babies. And I think 2 or 3 females gave me nothing. The rest slugged out. So it was pretty good as far as, the percentage of females that actually went.
Yeah, that's about 70%. That's pretty good. I wouldn't argue that.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy. I I usually am just like hope for the best, expect the worst. So I was pretty content with that. I was like, okay.
So other than, breeding less, did you do anything else different?
I mean, I bred earlier than I usually do, which I don't know has anything to do with it. I went by their behavior because we had that warm spell where they were just up, and clearly, I'm like, well, the males are pacing, so I'm going to, go with that. This year, I manually did wake them up, and this is the earliest I've done that, so we shall see how that goes. I don't know. But, I mean, so far, within a couple days, they are locking.
Oh, that's a good sign. Like I've tried, for example, at first when I started pairing, like Monday I would lock, Tuesday I would lock, Wednesday. Whereas now I spread it out some, and it seems to have helped some. But
so I usually do it just about. I'm home most days. I think I work from home, so almost every day I'll try pairings. Occasionally, I'll like take the day off, but I never pair the same female a day or two in a row ever. I will usually, some males will breed almost daily, either a different female and then go back to the original female. But I don't ever pair a female again and again and again, day after day after day. I'll either usually be a few days in between or a week in between pairings.
What's the longest gap you've been able to do? Like 2 weeks between pairings, or?
If you asked me earlier, I could have checked. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I know it was weeks. Maybe a month would be my guess.
Okay. Because some females I've been like, we'll say 5 locks between 3 weeks roughly,
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think, and I've never tried a month out after. I just never knew if they would actually still be receptive that long.
So I go until they are no longer receptive, but also I have much larger gaps between my pairing attempts with them. Like I don't think I've ever locked a female more than 3-4 times.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, usually it'll be like there are been some females in the past where it's like they'll take one lock and then they just won't be receptive anymore, and you'll get a litter out of them. Which maybe it was just the timing at the point, like, point I did it.
Well, and that's really all it needs is one at the right time. Just we don't always know when that is, sadly. Have you ever tried males and females in separate rooms?
You know what? I've been talking about doing that for years. I actually it was an idea I had maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and then I planned on doing that because I thought it would make a difference, because my theory was like, well, so many males, like only some like percentage of males would want to breed and others would be kind of like in a panic defensive mode. So I was wondering if it's because there were so many males in that same area that, the ones that were, quote unquote, less dominant or whatever you'd want to call it, they would just panic and want to run off. So I was thinking about if you kept them separately and brought them in and breed in a separate area, that maybe more males would want to breed. Now I have a smaller collection now, and I have really not had much of an issue. I don't know what the difference is, but I had most of my males breed for me last year. This year, we'll see how it goes. I don't know. Because that was something I've wanted to do. Like I was like planning on bringing some upstairs and just keeping them separate, like having like a rack of males here and then bringing like another in a different room and seeing if that maybe more will be willing to breed.
The reason I asked, I was talking to John, and his was more thinking on the female end, that the females sometimes all the pheromones in the room might mess with things, and something to do with like certain males wouldn't be as aggressive because it, but he's yet to try it.
I honestly, I don't know. I thought it was more of like an intimidation, like, thing, as far as like the males that, weren't as confident would, freak out. Like, I'm sure you've had it where you put a male in with a female and they just lose it. And they just defensively, like, poop and stuff and spaz out. And I always thought it was like, well, maybe it's because, all the other males around. But that was just like a theory.
It definitely could be like, we're guessing, speculating, trying to hopefully figure it out as we go. And I have no clue the exact answer. I'm hoping for the best. I have noticed some of my males that are like crazy like that. If I hold them and try to get their brain to work before I put him with the female, like I'll hold him by her, let him smell her in my hand, then some reason he gets enough confidence to get the job done.
Yeah.
I don't know why certain males I have are like that. And it could be, I don't know if it gets passed on, maybe. Do you think that's possible?
It's possible. I know personality can be. I have this one skink I got from this breeder out in California. I can't remember their name. They were old school. They were like getting out, and we kind of got the rest of their collection. And they named this one Firecracker, and they were like, "Well, you'll see why her name is Firecracker." And at the times I bred her, all her babies are little piss fires. Like they're just like, I'll even random deli cup. I'm just like, I'm spicy, and I just like gotta warn everyone before they get them. I'm like, this one's a little ass. Like most of these skinks will tame down, but this one will try to bite you.
Some people like the spicy ones.
Yeah. That's what the person that bought that one, they were excited about the fact that it was a little spicy.
It's a little asshole.
I was like,
well,
all right,
that's
good.
That's
what you got.
You get a nice variety, some for everyone.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. It had beautiful coloration to it too, and nice contrast. So,
are you planning on adding any rare or genetic blue tongues?
Right now, no. I mean, I would like to get back in the blotched again. As far as like the morphs, not at
Once
the
they're better
moment.
breeders.
What?
Once they're better breeders.
Once they're better breeders. I mean, I've had the morphs. I haven't really personally owned any. I mean, there was like the one white project we work with that originated in the United States, and then the had a melanistic and the albino, which of course the pure Easterns, and there can be issues with those.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
And it does seem that kind of hybrids might be the way to go on those for at least successful reproducing them.
From what I've heard, yes. I mean, I used to be, very against the hybrid thing just because, I had to be. I don't really know how much I really care though. And I mean, it's just as far as, just be honest what you're doing. I'm not going out of my way to make hybrids. Like I'm not. Personally, I am not looking to make hybrids, but I don't really have an issue with people who are.
Yeah. And it does seem that's the way things are changing, label it properly and
also, I mean, like you think about like, Eastern and Northerns, I mean, it just intergrades. It's not anything like you're not mixing, Indonesian species, and I have less problems with as far as, the intergrades go.
I think those will be easier to keep and just like I don't think I would ever do like Halmaheras to Easterns, for example.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, just
They're
so
that.
Different. Yeah. Do you guys feed the same diet to the Tegus and the blue tongues?
So in the past, I have given the Tegus a lot of dog food, like along with the eggs and the rats, and then the mixed greens and veggies and stuff. But like lately, and like I've been talking to a lot of other big Tegu breeders, like the Sacred Geckos guys, like Rose City Reptiles, and a lot of them said they kind of shy away from the dog food recently, just because of like. Some of them will say like they get the dog food like kind of stuck in their teeth, and that can cause like rotting issues. Now, if you're feeding them like a nice varied diet where they're getting a lot of other stuff, then obviously that's going to kind of negate that issue where their teeth are going to be cleaned out. But that's one thing I've heard about it. I haven't personally experienced it, but I figure if guys who bred a lot more Tegus than I have, say it's probably a good practice, and I'm going to just go with what they say because obviously they have more experience. But like my diet for like the babies when I raise them, a lot more insects than like blue tongues, for example. Like obviously blue tongues will eat insects, but a lot of us have found it's not really necessary to give them to them. But with the Tegus, I've found that like a lot of them won't even really start feeding until you start giving them like crickets and roaches and stuff. And then once I've got them like a few weeks worth of crickets, I can start supplementing like scrambled eggs and some of the other things and blueberries, just stuff like that. But it just seems like that first few weeks, they're just so tuned into like movement specifically that they just won't even touch like wet food or something where, cricket, you drop, like I'll have a scoop of dog food in there when I was, my last babies this last season. And like they would ignore it and I throw a bunch of crickets in and they go nuts. But again, after a few weeks, they pretty much start eating everything you put in front of them. But yeah, so I get different, like, similar idea like with omnivorous diet, but I just found that the Tegus specifically just kind of go for different things.
Do you think that's in the wild they're mainly eating insects at first then?
At first I would say probably yes, just based on how the babies act here. Now I do know the adults in the wild. I know a lot of the guys who used to trap them down in like Homestead, south of Miami, that area, they would literally use grape jelly as bait in the traps. Because a lot of the native stuff, like if you left like a can of cat food in there, like you'd catch possums and skunks and all kinds of stuff. But they found that when they put grape jelly in their traps, they would catch a lot more tegus and less of the other stuff. So, I mean, clearly in the wild, they're eating a lot of, fruit and stuff as well. And, I've gotten some of those Florida tegus and then they'll take a crap and they'll be full of blackberries and seeds. So, clearly they're eating a lot of fruit in the wild. So I started adding a lot more of that to my diet as well.
Weird. That you wouldn't think like grape jelly for a tegu, but yeah, I guess they do like fruit. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I'll throw in like a handful of blueberries or like a little half a banana or something, and they'll go just as nuts over that as they would over the insects once they get a little size to them.
Now, what about more of a, we'll call it a natural dog food diet? Like, like some people do like raw chopped up organs, some eggs and other chopped up meat. Do you do any of that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I've given them extra venison scraps when we were like, processing a deer down. I've given them, chicken livers, gizzards, stuff like that. They eat it up.
I give that to the
And then,
skinks
yeah,
too.
the skinks get it too. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll do like liver a lot. Like I actually just fed the baby skinks that. I actually just like have like one of those magic bullet things, and I just grind up the liver and I just mix it with the dog food, and they love it.
Yeah, the liver is awesome specifically because I mean that's what's filtering all the blood and stuff in the animals. So like you feed them a liver and that thing is chock full of like vitamins and minerals that you're not going to get from just regular meat.
So I do a lot of gizzards. Do you think it matters over the liver or both about the same?
I like liver. I don't know about the nutrients. The liver's just easier.
Yeah, liver is a lot easier because it's soft, it's easy to blend up.
Yeah.
And the gizzards, you gotta. I mean, we use those too. Like we were just feeding some out the other day. Just variety is the king, I guess.
We were giving the monitors some gizzards.
But we were chopping those up into like little pieces and bite-sized pieces. With the livers, they're so pliable. I mean, it's not like you have to chop up a liver for something to eat it if you really don't feel like it.
I think some of it is like, so I used to go catfishing and I'd use chicken liver a lot. And some of the times I left it in like my car or.
Oh, no.
I've made that mistake too.
Oh, no.
After smelling like the nasty rotten liver, it reminds me of it every time. So I just went with the gizzards. But it worked, that it works great for the catfish. I've used that, trunk cook stuff, but man, the smell lingers for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So how was your first season breeding Tegus?
Yeah, so I mean, I've kept them for years and just never really had much of a desire to breed them because there's so many people making them. But I figure with all the guys in Florida have, legislated out of the business, basically, I just feel like there's going to be a lot less people breeding them over the states. Like obviously most of those animals did go to other breeders and other people who are going to be setting them up. But I just feel like as they're dispersed, there's no way it's going to be quite as concentrated with the numbers. And, I bred them the first time just for the fun of it. Cause my buddy, I used to buy babies from him all the time. Some red Tegus. He was down in Florida breeding. He had like a trio of them. And he said, hey, with the legislation, I can't keep them anymore. So instead of buying babies for me, you just want to buy these adults. So we got those up here and I bred them and it was a lot of fun and, not too hard. I mean, I'm not saying it was easy. Like obviously we had our mistakes and, were made. And like, for example, we had 1.3 reds I bred and 2 of them slugged out completely. And it was like over 50 eggs for each clutch. So that sucked. But, now I learned my lesson. Okay. 1 male Tegu to 3 females clearly isn't enough. So over the course of this last year, I've been making sure that my ratio is improving as I buy more Tegus. So like at this time, the most any of my Tegus are going to be breeding are maybe 2 females and most of them are just singly paired up. So like just things like that, you learn by experience. You can read up on stuff and talk to people and you'll gain little tidbits of knowledge like that. But, certain things like that, I just didn't even think it would be an issue, but clearly it was. So,
yeah, and blue tongues too. The males are just as valuable as the females. I'll tell you that. Yeah. That's for sure.
No, this probably wasn't a factor, but since you got them, they were older males, right? Like they weren't like super young.
So the ones I got they were under like 7 or 8. He had them for a few years, but he said they weren't super old. I don't know the exact age. I could probably ask him. But yeah, I don't think it was that. And he had told me that when he breeds them, he'd usually get between the 2 or 3 females, he might get a clutch or a clutch and a half worth of eggs, basically. And, I was like, well, that makes sense because I got 1 clutch out of 3 females. So, and yeah, I mean, over the course of the year, I didn't even really mean to keep buying up Tegus. It's just funny. Like I had the ones I like breeding them. And then just people kept randomly just offering me Tegus for really cheap. And I was like, well, I can't say no to that. I may as well keep it too. And, I've amassed this fairly good sized collection of them now. But the problem was everybody kept offering me cheap females. And I guess that is, you need those males and people have too many females. They'd rather get rid of those than get rid of their males because those are what really drive production. But, luckily I spent a premium on a couple males and I ended up getting a few more males with females, good deals and kind of built up my collection that way.
So what do you have besides reds, or are you strictly reds?
So I've got a handful of pure reds. I've got a couple pure blues I just got recently. I've got a handful like purples and various crosses like that. And then right now I've got three black and whites. And then I've got a big Chaco one as well. So yeah, a little bit of everything. Oh, and I've got my buddy and I, we're splitting the project. He has an albino male and a het female we're going to breed. So that'll be fun too.
Are they blue albinos, red?
Yeah, so the albino, there's pure red albinos and there's pure blues. This is a fire ice, so I believe the albino is from the blue side with that. I mean, these like crosses with Tegus are kind of weird. Like they're more of like a brand name. Like, well, I call this a fire and ice because it's like 75% red and 25% blue or whatever the percentage is. But so as far as that stuff goes, I haven't really read into it too much. A lot of it seems a little bit wishy-washy anyways. But as far as, I'll keep the name on whatever it was when I got it, I guess. But to me, I'm going to breed them. I'm going to say, hey, these are red blue crosses and they're albino and these are hets and whatever. And, I kind of try and keep it simple that way. But if people want to know, the lineage, yeah, this was a fire ice male bred to a true blue female and a blah, blah, blah. And, it goes from there. But
do you plan on getting any of the red albinos?
Eventually, yeah, because I do like the reds probably the best. Like, I just like how they look, and the males get those giant jowls, and the blues are nice because they're small, but I just like the reds that look a little bit better. But eventually, yeah, they're just expensive right now for like a true pure red albino. I think they're going for like $3,500 or $4,000 right now. Last I saw them, at least. Maybe it'll go down. I'd like it to go down a little bit, but I also, with things like that, I want it to become more affordable, but I don't want it to crash either. So it's like, I hate saying, oh, I hope it gets cheaper so I can get it, because, well, then when I breed it, then it's cheap for me too, It's not all about the money, but, it's nice to make a little bit on some of these projects where some of the other ones are just more like pet level animals,
Well, and the nice thing on the red albinos, so, even if they do come down to, I don't know, we'll say $2,000 for just because, that's still a beautiful animal that's going to strike people's eyes that they're going to want to get it. And some people will spend that amount on just a pet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Some people spend $10,000 on just a pet, even if they like it enough. So are you planning on building a lot more outdoor tegu enclosures then?
Oh, yeah. So the ones that I built up a collection of them right before brumation season, so that I wouldn't have to worry about building their giant outdoor enclosures right away. So I kind of timed it so that come early March, I'm going to have a nice week or so of building outdoor enclosures to get ready for when they wake up near the end of the month. So like right now I've got probably, depending on how we set up our enclosures, probably 8 or 10 of them, but I've got about 20 tegus. So it's going to be and what I'm planning on doing is doing like a big row of like kind of uniform cages in one spot on the property, because as it is now, it's a bunch of kind of like, I got this cage built this way and this cage built that way, and they all work great, but I'm a little bit anal about like looking at it. I like it to be like kind of uniform and everything kind of match up. And, end of the day, I guess it doesn't really make a huge difference besides for me, but I'm the one spending my time working with them. So
do you have them set up where you can actually go in the outdoor enclosures with them or no?
They're 4 foot by 8 foot enclosures. Most of them I kind of went lower on the height, so they're about 3 feet tall. So I can get in them, but I have to crouch down to kind of get in the back where the door kind of hinges open. The couple of the cages I was using this year were actually modified iguana cages, so they had a lot more height to them. You could actually step in them. But like long term, the tegus are rarely going to use that height, if ever. I mean, the ones I had in the 3 foot tall enclosures, I put logs and stuff in there for them. And I mean, I can't even remember if I saw the reds on the logs besides crawling over them just to move around. We've got one little rescue tegu that has a big branch in its cage and it climbs up there and basts. Yeah, pretzel. Somebody, I don't know what happened to the thing. I don't know if it was a metabolic disease or what, but it has a big kink in its back.
She's got lots of kinks.
Yeah, lots of kinks. But yeah, for the most part, like most of my adults I've found don't really do much climbing. The babies will climb up on the branches to get closer to the basking spots, things like that.
Why she goes
but yeah, she goes
in the
yeah,
air.
she goes
It's
pretty
a
high.
big branch that goes up to this, like, because they wear iguana cages and there's like a big platform up there, and she'll climb 4 or 5 feet up there, hang out.
But I found so I think 3 feet tall is probably adequate. If you want to go crazy, maybe 4 feet. But I mean, as long as they're getting adequate sun and basking areas in there, they're not needing to climb higher to find those basking temps. Because I mean, like I've been down to Homestead and seen all the tegus running around everywhere, and they're always on the ground. Like I don't really ever see them in the trees at all. That's iguana territory there.
Well, and a lot of the outdoor ones I have seen are probably that 3-4 foot height. You know, it's kind of hard to tell in a video, but there's been a couple I've seen that they will, and it was probably just because they wanted to, you know, be able to stand up without crouching.
Mm-hmm.
But on a larger scale, you know, if you're going to do 20 like that, if you're doing 6 foot, that's twice the material as 3.
Yeah.
Adds up a lot.
Yeah. And twice the material. And it would be a real shame if I put all that effort into it and I walked out there and I didn't see a single one using that space ever. You know?
Yeah, especially if they don't utilize it, you know, or, you know, maybe once in a blue moon they'll climb up it. But
yeah.
So how is the tegu market then since Florida's law change?
I sold out of, I made 2 clutches last year. First time breeding, I bred 5 females. I got 2 clutches that were successful. And I did sell out of them within about 3-4 months, maybe. And that wasn't, you know, really, I wasn't like wholesaling a lot or anything. So, I mean, it's pretty decent. I'm retailing almost everything. Just a couple friends. I wholesale a few just as favors, really. But for the most part, I just hatched what I hatched and just kind of slowly trickled them out 2 or 3 of the show over the course of the last few months. And it did great. Now, look, going forward, I really think that if I do have 5, 6, 7 clutches of animals at a time, some of them are going to be wholesaled, and those will be wholesaled right away because I've got buyers who are pretty much always taking that sort of thing. And then it also helps selling stuff. If you have 1 tank of tegus on your table, fewer people tend to buy from you than if you have like 5 or 6 of them. So like we kind of do a similar thing with the blue tongues. Like obviously we're not bringing 200 baby skinks to a show, but if you have 4 or 5 of them, people walk right by you. But if you have a nice little, you know, maybe 36 to 4 foot section of table that has a nice selection of a couple dozen skinks on it, then people are way more likely to, you know, they've got a bigger selection. They see that it's a bigger thing there, and you see it's harder to walk right by it. So I think it'll be the same thing with the tegus too. I mean, I know plenty of people who, you know, bring in the majority of their income on tegus, and they do great. And it's one of those things. It'll be nice to something like that. Like I was talking to Cheryl, we've got all the space in the farm, and you know, most of our reptiles are indoor animals. So if there's something I can utilize that outdoor space for, and that, you know, I'm all about it.
What about doing full outdoor with heated like hide boxes?
Too cold here.
Yeah, here it's just not an option. If we were like maybe in like Texas or something, I could see that happening. But like just for here, like for example, this week, I mean, it was in the negatives a few times.
Yesterday, it was like -3.
Yeah. So unfortunately, where we are, it's just not an option. Like it'd be nice to have like a cool facility with like indoor, outdoor runs and just like close them off in the wintertime or something. But you know, that's a construction project that's a little bit behind or beyond my skills.
Yeah, that would take a lot of time if you did it yourself too.
Yeah. And the other thing though is though, like when they're brewmating, because I've had them go multiple ways where like I've had them brewmate in the past where like say my ambient temperature just drops naturally as it does in the wintertime, and the animals will just start slowing down whether you have the heat lamp on or not. And when people, you know, I know a lot of pet people do it more this way where they're brewmating their animals, you know, because they're tegus in their living room in a big 4x8, you know, display cage or something, and they'll still leave the heat lamp on, but the ambient temps drop, so the animals are a lot less active, but they're still waking up, going to get water occasionally, that sort of thing. But when you brewmate them down in like the 50s, like they don't even like move. Like I still give them little water dishes and stuff just in case they wake up and get thirsty. But I mean, the majority of the time when I go and look at them, they're just in the same spot they were like, you know, a week and a half, 2 weeks prior when I last looked at them. And so like it would be cool to have a giant like kind of indoor outdoor setup, but again, it's another thing, like I just don't think they would really utilize it because in the summertime, you know, they've got this nice big outdoor enclosure, they have no reason to go into the indoor part, and in the wintertime they're going to go find a spot to sleep and not really move too much. So I try and be as efficient as I can while giving them as much space as they need, and it seems to be like a good balance that way, to have like the big giant outdoor enclosure and then smaller indoor, you know, brumation chambers basically.
And it sounds like you know, well thought of, you know, you spent the time thinking about it and that does sound like the best option for where you live. You
Yeah,
know.
and I mean, I talked to a lot of different Tegu guys too who have way more experience than me. So it's not like I just like, oh, I'll just do this and see if it works. It was kind of like, okay, these guys breed a lot of Tegus, and like, clearly they're having success with it. So I'm going to emulate what they do. Even if I'm not directly copying them, like I still have my own, swing on a few things, but like essentially the process is going to be the same. Even if you put your own little thing on it there.
Well, and sometimes you have to change it, what someone does in Texas, you're a little different in Missouri, and it seems relatively straightforward, similar to the blue tongues how you got it, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, and it's similar to the blue tongues too. Like being more hands-on and like watching the animal's behavior is a lot more useful too. I mean, you'll avoid injuries that way. Like again, last year was my first year breeding, and I left the males and the females together a little bit too long, and one of the males lost the tip of his tail, which not the end of the world. Tegus, they grow them back, but I'd still rather avoid that if possible. So.
How long do you keep them together for breeding?
So this season, like I said, it was my first time. And what I did was I left them basically until the females started showing more territorial behavior. Because once they start producing like big follicles and eggs inside, they'll start like nesting. And it's actually really cool to watch because the females they'll take all the hay and straw and stuff that you have in the enclosure, and they actually start like pushing it into the, like I make little hide boxes out of those, big black Home Depot totes. And I just cut a hole in the side of it, and they'll actually go through the enclosure, like pushing it in there like a kitten making biscuits. Like it's really cool to watch. And once they start that nesting behavior, they're obviously done breeding. And then if you go in there, if there's a male there, they get really defensive over that little nest area. So I just kind of keep an eye on them daily at that point. And that's my plan this year is to pair them up, witness some locks, and then as soon as the female starts getting a little bit cagey with the male, that's I'll pull them out before it causes an issue, I guess. So.
If you were to pull them out before that, would there be a certain number of locks you would aim for?
See, I'm not really sure yet because I've had issues with multiple species where removing the males too early and you end up getting a lot of slugs. Like woma pythons are like that. My first few tries breeding woma pythons, like I was having females that would produce 5, 6, 9 follicles, and I'd be like, oh great. I'd pull the males out, and then 3 months later, there's nothing going on. And then the first year that I had the opportunity to pair up just one-to-one pairings, I was working with a buddy's collection as well as my own womas. And I think he had about 20 womas, and I had maybe 8 or 10 of them at the time. And I think I got like 11 clutches out of that year, 11 or 12, including my own. And that was just putting one male, one female, and basically just leaving them until the females were laying upside down. So obviously reptiles, like snakes versus lizards, very huge difference in how they're going to be reproducing. But like at least for that, I learned my lesson by pulling the males out too early. So with the Tegus, it's one of those things where I don't know if somebody that I know knows more about it and something I could probably ask around, but I don't know the answer specifically at least. So that's one of those things where, a combination of just asking around and seeing what works is going to be where I go forward,
Well, that's what it is. It's a learning process as we go. And, you might do some for 3 years. Then, all of a sudden you figure out that, wow, I only needed 2 or, whatever it is. And you change it up and goes great from there.
I wish I knew it earlier for the woma pythons because I had like 2 or 3 years. I probably could have produced clutches that I was just pulling the males out too early, or another thing, spreading the males too thin between different animals and stuff.
Do they not retain sperm that long, womas?
Not that I've noticed. I mean, I've had trouble getting them to produce eggs when I am pairing them up. So, I mean, as far as like retaining sperm year to year, I don't really feel like that's probably very common with them. But I mean, like this year, I had a couple males go to 2 females and 1 male basically just on 1 female. And once that female's good to go, I might switch them over to another female that's like a little bit further along or further behind. But just with how it's been so far, I'm just so paranoid. I'm like, you know what? I'd rather get one good clutch than try and split this male between 2 females and get 0 clutches or something like that. So,
Have you tried ultrasounding at all?
so I've ultrasounded them, but that's another thing where like, even if they may have follicles, like I've had them that had gigantic follicles and they still absorbed them. And I'm assuming it was just because the male wasn't stimulating or something. Because every time I just leave them in there, I have really good success with that. So, but I mean, I went as far as like pythons go, like with eggs and stuff. I've gotten pretty well. I've gotten by pretty well just palpating, especially like a ball python that can palpate the follicles. And you know, when you've palpated 10,000 ball pythons over the years, you can kind of get a sense for like how big the follicles are and how far along they are. And the womas, they're very, very similar size. So, you know, similar idea there. But yeah, but again, you know, I keep it simple and just leaving the males in seems to work well. So I don't need to get an ultrasound.
Well, and they are kind of expensive too.
Yeah. Yeah, like our buddy has one. And I've used it a couple times just to keep an eye on a few things here and there. But for the most part, yeah, it's not something I really see as a necessary purchase, especially like if the 1 or 2 times I might just want to check up on something. I have a buddy who has one I can borrow for a couple days. Then yeah, that's the extent there.
Is that why you don't see many people breeding the womas then? Just they're a little trickier?
So they're trickier to breed, not that crazy. I mean, again, once you just kind of get past the leaving the males in, they breed pretty prolifically. It's just the main issue I've seen that people have, and I've had the same problem before I kind of got an idea of how to do it, was incubating the eggs, because they need high humidity or they'll dry up. But if they get wet, they will pretty much immediately just die. So like the best way I've found to do it so far is those like sim containers, or like a similar kind of DIY version of that, where they're on like a grate suspended above like a damp substrate. Like some people use like the cricket crystals to make like a wet, damp substrate underneath. I used coconut chip last year and it worked great, but just separated from the eggs so they're not actually touching the moisture, but they have that like 100% humidity inside the box. And then I go in every couple of days and I wipe off the, I think my camera just died. Let me change this. You can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, my camera died. I'll just swap a new battery real quick.
Oh no.
Oh
no.
So you just wipe off the condensation then pretty much though?
Yeah, so I wipe off the condensation because if it drips on the eggs, that's where you get the issues there. And then a lot of people also have success, and this worked for me last year too, is once I don't know if that actually worked or not, but once the babies are about maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks out, I think that's when the eggs actually do need more air because they're kind of absorbing that air sac inside the shell. And then there's another battery plugged in the living room. Yeah, if you want to grab that. But once the babies are almost fully formed, it helps to have a lot more air. So a lot of times that's when people will like either leave the lid cracked, or that's when they'll open up a ventilation hole or something. But I kind of got away with just checking on it daily over the last week because that produces, plenty of airflow that way and air exchange. And I'm, eagerly anticipating seeing them pip. So I'm checking them every day, so.
Now, I saw some of the babies you produced. You got like more of a light look and a dark look. Are those separate pairings? Are they pretty variable?
Yeah, so I've noticed with woma pythons, like whether you want to call it a morph or just like a line thing, I have noticed that they're very, very kind of like a blue tongue skink, where they're very like heritable, I'll say, like where there we go, we got camera back. So if you breed a woma that's light colored and you breed it to a light colored woma, you pretty much are going to get light colored babies. There's going to be some variation, but it seems like they're very, very prone to passing on their kind of general look, even if it's just like a lineage or like a polygenetic thing. But there is one gene that I have kind of accidentally got a hold of where it looks very, very, very similar to this Australian gene they're calling hosepipe. And that's the one they just proved out this year that has a super form. That's that solid black woma that's been going around Facebook. Okay. And I've been looking at it. My babies look pretty much identical to the babies, and it acts like a dominant trait where, like, I bred the male to a normal female, and then out of like 7 babies, there'd be 2 black ones and like 5 normals. So I'm hoping I can reproduce that, because I haven't really called it proven yet because I only made them once. But like, if I can make it again with like a different female, then I can kind of say, okay, this is clearly a dominant thing. It's not just a fluke. And then hopefully a few years, down the line, I can end up trying to prove it out. But I don't want to say it's that yet, because I have really no way to know that besides like, oh, it looks kind of like them. But, until I have actual proof, I'm not going to say I have a morph or something. But for the most part, woma breeding is more just polygenetic, line bred or selectively bred, kind of like the same as like how blue tongues are, commonly bred.
That would be nice though, getting, even if it's something else genetic that you produce, that would get more people into them, even if it's not the solid black like melanistic one.
Yeah, I mean, even just making cool, because the babies are kind of dark, kind of black with orange stripes up their sides. I've been calling them bushfires just because it kind of has that fiery look to them. Hate to be that guy naming a project before it proves out to be anything, but I like them. So if it does prove out, I'll be happy. And if not, then I'm like, bushfire line, then not morph.
That's, either way, you could start the line. Yeah. And if they are more unique looking, people are going to want them or should want them.
I mean, the thing at the origin of it, my friend Sarah bought it at a Tinley show in like 2013 or 14. And I saw her when she bought it. I was like, that's a badass looking baby woma. And then like a couple years later, she was getting out of the woma. So I ended up taking over the project, and she doesn't know who it came from originally. It was just like a random table at Tinley. So maybe there's more floating around. That'd be sweet to know. I have no idea what the original origin of it was, or because it seems very similar to this Australian gene, but obviously those aren't, if they're coming over here, it's illegitimate, and I don't want that. But theoretically,
really weird,
theoretically it would be a different, unrelated animal, most likely, So
yep.
So
once in a while, those unique ones somehow make it over, though, it seems.
Yeah. It would be bizarre though if it just showed up as like.
I don't really think that is even the case, just because if someone went through all the trouble of sneaking this thing over here, then why would they just sell it as a normal at Tinley, So I think it's probably just some random thing that popped up, and maybe it's a not quite so uncommon like mutation, because like how albinos, you see those across all kinds of species, and not that uncommon to see them pop up in the wild. So maybe that's just another thing like that, where this specific mutation is just fairly more likely to occur than other mutations.
Oh, it's definitely possible. You never know what's floating there, whether some of the stuff you happen to breed the two right animals together and you pop it out. So how is now? You've been Schaumburg, correct, or have? In the past?
I did. I think I've done all the Schaumburgs. I may have missed one or something, but I think I've done all 3 or 4 that they've had so far.
What is your thought of the show? Like, if I was gonna say vend a bigger one where blue tongues are available, I contemplated that one based on when mine are born.
Yeah, I've done well at that show, and I've done okay. So like, obviously, I'm just doing it solo, or just Cheryl and I for the most part. So we're not, racking up expenses with employees and this and that. And, we usually find a cheaper hotel in the convention center, so we're saving there. So to do so if we go to a show like that and do a couple grand, it's like, okay, like I would have liked to do more, but I mean, it's not like the weekend was wasted. We got to see all our friends and hang out, and the social aspect as well. But I mean, I've never gone to that show and lost my ass, I'll say. As far as blue tongues go, I think Cheryl's usually done pretty well with blue tongues there. Like, I think the last one you sold 4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, most shows I do sell some. Yeah, I mean, there's been shows where I was like terrified. I was like, oh my god, I'm not selling. Oh no, wait, the last one I sold, I think like 6 or 7.
I think you did really well with the last Schaumburg. Yeah. But I mean, the shows, it's not Tinley, it's not Arlington, but like, there's good crowds that come there, and I usually have a pretty good spot right by the front door, so I'm lucky there too. Although that can also be a blessing and a curse, because sometimes people come in and they don't want to buy something right away. They want to walk the show first, then you never see them again. But for the most part, being right near the front door means, at the very least, everybody has to see me, because sometimes you'll be in some corner somewhere, and maybe everybody makes it back there, maybe they don't. But if you're by the entrance, everybody has to go through there. So, but I like the show overall. It's a nicer convention center and hotel, I think, than even like Tinley. Like, Tinley is a nice hotel, don't get me wrong, but Schaumburg just seems like a higher quality place too. And it's a fun show. The very first one I did phenomenally, and then like since then, I've kind of done the same numbers, even though I didn't, because I looked at it like the first show I did. I had a bunch of baby captive bred rubber boas a friend produced, and those all sold like immediately for like $300 a piece, and I had like 8 or 10 of them. And then the other shows, the difference in the amount of money was about the same as that amount from the rubber boas alone. So I'm like, well, if I have a unique animal that everybody wants to buy and I sell out of them, then that's the difference right there. So everything else I sold about the same. So
Well, it's good at least that it's, at least worst case consistently decent,
yeah.
Because then I would hate to, go through all that trouble and, get a whopping 0 sales,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it would be nice, going and seeing the people.
Yeah. Well, actually, come to think of it, the last Schaumburg I did better than I did at the last Arlington's. So there's that. Usually I do really well at Arlington too, but the last one the first day was fine, and the second day just for whatever reason was almost a bust. So, but that's how shows go sometimes. It's just depending on what you have to bring and what people are looking for.
But it was still a decent crowd.
Yeah. I mean, those shows are never empty or anything like that. I've had a couple like of the St. Louis ones that weren't that great, but I've also had some that were great. So.
Time of year change or just
I think the St. Louis is always in October. I think they only have one date in St. Louis every year. Yeah, I think it's only October if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I mean, and that's usually not a bad time of year either. So
yeah, you would think that'd be a good time. Summer, it seems like at least around here, some of the shows can be hit or miss. People are out camping, doing other stuff, whereas we also get a short summer, so everyone wants to utilize it while they can.
Oh yeah.
Is there any joint projects you two have?
I mean, kind of. So like, there's a lot of colubrids and stuff that we've kind of both picked up, and it's not like I'm not like, oh, this is mine and this is yours. It's kind of like, oh, you got a bunch of these here. I got this, so throw it in there. Like we've got some Euromastics. Like I picked up a bunch of Euros, and it was kind of Cheryl's project, so I just kind of got them for her. And then, she's gotten me a couple things in the past just because I liked them or something. But yeah, as far as that, I mean, like her blue tongues are her thing. My Tegus are my thing. My womas are my thing. But like then all the other stuff that's kind of in between is just kind of like, yeah, this is yours, but we're both going to help out with it, and this is mine. We're both going to help, kind of that sort of thing. So.
Well, it sounds like you guys got at least a good system that works.
Yeah. I mean, like, Cheryl's pretty independent with the blue tongues and her stuff, and I'm kind of independent with my stuff. But yeah, again, we kind of fill in the gaps for some of the in-between animals.
So to wrap it up, is there one tip that you guys would give a new breeder, whether breeding Tegus, breeding blue tongues, or any other species?
So I answered the same question in a group recently, and the answer I gave was, if you're going to start breeding animals, do not expect to make any money off it at the very least for the first like 3 or 4 years, if not longer. Depends what you're doing, obviously, but and how much you put into it. But for the very, very vast majority of cases, you're going to be operating at a loss, at least while you're raising up the animals from babies, or even if you buy adult breeders, you still got all the overhead, like the caging and the racks and the feed and all that you're going to have to just pay out off the bat. So you're not going to be making money until you make back all that usually. And if you're raising animals from babies, that's going to be a few years. If you're, even if you're a big baller, you're buying a bunch of adults right away, you have that has its own issues there, obviously, as far as whether you're getting good breeders or not, whether you're getting sick animals or not. So I just tell people, look, if you want to breed animals, make it a hobby and have a job for the first 3 or 4 years. You're not going to be self-sustaining. You're likely never going to be self-sustaining. It's going to be a hobby for almost everybody. But depending on how much time you put into that, because Cheryl and I are way more than full-time. And let me tell you, it's still a struggle a lot of the time. We get by, but, there's always unexpected expenses and this and that. So, yeah, if you're going to get into breeding stuff, just make it a hobby and don't expect to make any money. And if you start making money eventually, that's a bonus. Cheryl, any ending advice here? No.
I was like, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know.
So I think it came in after the question. The question was any tips for anybody looking to get into breeding? What would you tell them? Maybe I covered it.
Well, buy from good people, research,
Don't necessarily go for the cheapest all the time, because I've gotten some animals like my Tegus, I've gotten some great deals on them, and I kind of picked them up because of that. And then other ones, I spent a premium on it because it came from somebody who I thought, you know what, I would like to have some stuff from this person because it's going to enhance my projects overall. So there's always, I don't want to say always buy the premium or always find the deals, but there's certainly, circumstances for both. So.
Well, thank you both for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Where can everyone find you guys?
So Cheryl's website is bluetongueskink.com. Very, very easy to remember. She keeps it fairly updated. Sometimes, usually. And then I'm at mikesexotics.com, and I am almost as updated as Cheryl. So. But yeah, we have a lot of social media too. Like we do a lot on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel I haven't really done much with yet, but I do mostly like kind of short herping videos on there. And then, yeah, we're all over the place. If it's social media, we're probably there in one form or another.
Well, thank you both again for coming on, and you guys have a great rest of your night.
All right. Thanks, man. You too.